Right, so before I start, I should point out I'm not an air quality expert. So Rohit Chakraborty, who's in India at the moment, is doing a lot of its work, along with Syed Munir, who's not here. And Steve Jubb is the technical lead for the observatory. So anything that I say I've done, actually Steve's done. What is the observatory? The observatory is a capital piece of kit. So we were awarded 2.4 million a couple of years ago, and we're 29 months into a 36-month build period. So we are censoring up the city and building the platform behind that allows us to gather that data and share it. We're particularly focused on sustainability as an agenda, obviously. Within that, greenhouse emissions and air quality, I'll talk a bit about that today. Our core focus really is understanding the urban metabolism, which is the movement of resources around the city and its stocks and flows, and how that actually works and how that relates to a circular economy. And we're really interested in a sort of data-driven approach to that, because when we started to get into this, we realised that there's only one city in the world that's got anything like enough data to understand what's going on, and that's Singapore, and everybody else is lagging way behind. So we can't do the work we want to do to influence how cities are developed and designed because the data isn't there. Hence the observatory. What I will say is we've got about £400,000 to spend between now and March. It's not all entirely allocated. If anybody has good ideas as to how we can spend money on kit in the city to support the gathering of data around these issues, please let us know. We need to have it all allocated by Christmas so that we end up spending it by March, because if we don't spend it, it goes back to the government. And we don't want that happening. We have a developing architecture, and again, I can't go through that in detail today. We have the data storage up and running and a portal up and running. I'm going to show you the portal a little bit. What we're working on at the moment is how we gather data from both our own kit in the field and other data sets in the city. So you won't be able to read that. But again, this is a work in progress. We're still in the build phase. What are we gathering? Again, I won't go through all this in detail, but most of it's environmental data. So the data sets are in two broad parts, really. Environmental data, including quite a lot on air quality and weather stations, and data on the infrastructure. Some of that is through a van that I'll show you in terms of gathering the visual data, and we're also pulling together data sets about the infrastructure that you can't see. So the portal is up and running. If we had more time, I could click on that. It's actually not on our main website at the moment. It's a separate website which is there. You can go into it. You can grab the data. You can filter it in terms of what time and what data sets you want. And every day we're adding another sensor. Well, broadly every day we're adding another sensor to this. So it's finally up and running. It's taken a long time, but we're kind of on program. And we're very keen to work with people who might find uses for that data, not just the air quality stuff I'll talk a bit more about. We're building a digital twin. We didn't call it a digital twin until other people started calling these things digital twins, but part of the objective is to build this three-dimensional model with a feedback loop, which allows us to understand what's going on across systems in the city, which is key to what we want to do. That's in development. This is the van that's gathering the visual data. So this is just on the road last week. It's not finished yet, but it's a very expensive roof rack, essentially, with Lidar, Prof, visual, thermal, hyperspectral, much higher data rate than the kind of Google cars that you see in the other sort of mapping, because what we want to do with it is understand the material stock and the thermal signature of the city. So that's, as I said, it's up and running, but it's not finished yet. Moving more towards the air quality, Mobius is our kind of air quality van, which was on the road 6 months ago?
About a year now.
About a year ago. So this has an expensive, I'm going to explain this a little more, high quality air quality sensors in the back and a weather station, which allows us to go and spot check what's going on around the city. Supporting this, we have we've been working with other stakeholders in the city to build what is now a pretty strong IoT network compared to other cities. I was quite surprised at how easy it was to get from 0 to somewhere with the community in the city, so it shows what you can do. On the AQ side, we have a number of questions we want to answer. So in order to understand air quality better in the city, we can't deploy lots of expensive sensors. It's just far too expensive. So the one in the back of that van's £80,000. I think it's about 80 grand, wasn't it?
120.
120. I was interested in that. So you obviously can't put one of those on the end of everybody's street. So what we can do though is deploy sensors which are IoT based, medium cost sensors which are about £5 grand each, and then figure out ways to integrate that data, and in order to get a better understanding of what's going on at a high resolution. So that's the key focus. And when we started doing this, it was a small part of the observatory, and it's grown because of the sort of desire of the community to work on air quality. So the sensors we're deploying, there's a low-cost IoT database, which Graham's going to explain. We haven't met before, Graham, but Graham works with Rohit. So we've been part of this community building out this low-cost IoT sensors. We have a number of these personal flow devices that we give out to anybody who's serious about wanting to use it, which allows us to track dynamically what's going on around the city. We're 47 of these medium cost sensors. How many of those are in, Steve, now?
On Wednesday, there'll be about 40.
40, right, okay. And then we've got the van, as I mentioned it, and then there's this DEFRA and City Council stations, which are the fixed stations that DEFRA use. And as I said, the idea is to bring all this data together because in order to understand what's going on at a higher res. Again, I'm sure Graham will talk about this more, but there is a number of websites. So this data is on the observatory website. It's also on the Clean Air Sheffield portal. Are you going to talk about that later?
Yeah.
Right. So it's out there and it's available for people to use. And the data, what Rohit's been doing with Steve and others is checking the relative performance of the cheap sensors with the expensive sensors, and they're pretty good, right? So these are some of the better plots, to be honest, but the sensor quality isn't as bad as I thought it would be. And that gives us some real hope that we can actually start to create models and run simulations that are quite close to reality, closer than I thought we might do. We have a couple of outreach projects. We've got a project in Kampala where we're deploying some of this kit and the same modelling process, and we've just started a conversation with people in Islamabad about doing it there, because the idea being that if we can get this thing up and running and we can show how maybe just one decent sensor is needed and you can deploy cheap sensors around a city, you can deploy that pretty much anywhere. One thing I will say before I finish, we've got a hackathon in November, 22nd and 23rd of November. This has been organised by Sheffield Technology Parks. I don't think we've got a location yet. I couldn't find it anywhere in the email trail. And we're developing the challenges at the moment. I'd be very happy to hear from anybody tonight who's got any idea about what they might be. But the three we have at the moment is the visualising of environmental data. So how do we understand, communicate that to various different stakeholders, whether it be policymakers, national, local, or the public. 2D and 3D, we're building a Unity-based visualisation platform based upon the visual data from the van I mentioned. So that's one challenge area. Second one is we're interested in gathering pretty much any data set, but the higher res the better, because you can only really understand these problems if you start to bring multiple data sets together. And the third is the tagging and registering of assets from visual data. So once we have this three-dimensional surface map of the city, how do we actually identify what's a building, what's a lamppost, and so on. We've got some work going on that, but we're very interested in working with others. And again, anything else that anybody can think of, either before or on the day, because we don't want to be constrained by our own perception of the problem. We've set aside £50,000 for the hackathon, in terms of we'll be awarding that on the weekend. Maybe more than 50,000, depending on how much we spend on other pots, and that's likely to be 2 or 3 awards, but we'll see what comes forward. So that's a very, very quick overview of the observatory and the air quality side of it. Thank you.